Full disclosure, news and commentary number. Shit, what am I up to? Nine? Nine or nine? Nine. A pretty good weekend, yeah, in Georgia wrestling in the Southeast in general. And big, big weekend coming up. Let's just get into it. It's so much fun, by the way. People messaging me and contacting me and either saying, I hear stuff that you say come up in conversation at other shows. I can't wait to hear your take on this, that, and the other. People wanting to know what my take is on other stuff, like the Bully Ray Ring of Honor thing. I'll say something about that right away. The thing about the Ring of Honor show, the fan being taken backstage, that's something to talk about, no doubt. But I'm going to make that as part of a Platinum Story Time, my second one. I'm going to tell a story about how I used to handle out of control fans. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's going to tie into the Bully Ray Ring of Honor thing. Yeah. Let's just jump into it. A good place to start, of course. I'm going to devote. A lot of people, of course, want to hear what I thought about Southern Fried and all the things associated with Shindig. I've had a lot to say about it, and that's going to be my commentary part. Ooh, something exciting to look forward to right off the jump. A couple of shows happened over the weekend. I'm thinking Bushido specifically of their big crossover fight with another federation, which I think is very interesting. Haven't got a show report in on that, so I can't talk about it. Please get those kind of things in a timely fashion. I wait until Tuesday morning early to do this thing to see what pops up. Let's talk about New Generation. Yeah, putting 250 people in an arena that holds more than 3,000. What the fuck is going on? Yeah, supposedly it was an all right show, and different people who were there sort of gave their takes of like, yeah, it was a pretty good show. But who fucking 250 people in a? I'm sure the guy lost his ass and went online talking about how he lost his ass, which is incredibly weird to me. But it just shows the sort of markdom nature of running a show like this. And it's headlined by Joey Ryan and Rebel. By the way, I've tried to book Rebel in the past. I found her to have an incredibly inflated sense of her own value. Not that she was a bad person, not that she wasn't a pro to deal with, but the amount of money that she was asking back then was pretty unreasonable, yeah. Versus Crazy Steve, who I hear nothing but great things about. Everybody loves working with Crazy Steve, and Rosemary, who I think is amazing, really fantastic. But 250 people, which begs the question, and other shows in Rome that did 1,000 were considered a failure. So what's 250? It's a disaster, right? Speaking of Joey Ryan, this is my first rant. This is my take on Joey Ryan. He's gotten a lot of attention recently, and there's two camps, right? There's he's terrible for wrestling and he's sort of a shitty person, and I can see that side. I have stories about Joey Ryan going back 10 years or more about what a piece of shit the guy was. I'm not saying he's necessarily that anymore, but he was definitely sort of an untoward piece of shit. Just incidents friends had with him. I'll go into more detail about that at another time. But he's basically the kind of guy who would just, he's staying in your place as a favor, and he's fucking your girlfriend and not seemingly not caring about it. That's Joey Ryan, right? It wasn't towards me. I don't know if I've even met the guy actually. And then there's the camp where it's like he's such a hustler, he's making all this money, he's getting all this attention, people can hate if they want to hate, blah, 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 blah. Why am I wearing this hat today? Well, I'm a little proud of this hat in one sense, because it was kind of an award through work. Two, I want to cover up my hair, because it's all messed up because it's super early in the morning and just got done working out and I look like shit, but I wanted to get this out this morning and today. Computer quit doing weird stuff. And 3, I hadn't taken the tags off of this thing yet. You see that, right? Remember when there was a time where it was kind of cool to keep the tags on your hat, and didn't that look great? No, it was stupid, right? It was dumb. We look back on those things now and we go, it's dumb. So here's my rant about Joey Ryan. Okay, on the one hand, people are saying it's new and people don't get it and he's a groundbreaker and all this stuff. But there have always been guys that did shit that sort of defied convention. And not all of them lasted. And not all of them, it ended up being a good thing. Some cases it was a bad thing, right? And some things historically we remember in a different way than they really were at the time. But when it boils down to it, sometimes they're just tags on a hat where later on you just kind of look back and you're embarrassed about it, right? Some things do last, like Brian Pillman is somebody who people look at now and go, wow, that shit was so avant-garde and so dangerous and so new and so whatever. Same with ECW, right? But at the time, a lot of that stuff was considered really in bad taste and it's going to ruin wrestling and blah, blah, blah. And the answer is somewhere in between, right? A lot of the trends that ECW started did contribute to the ruination of wrestling in many ways, right? The devaluing of big moves and that kind of thing. Now, ECW, I think, doesn't get enough credit for putting things in a sort of angle context and that kind of thing, but there's no doubt that them ramping things way up as far as like false finish kickouts for effect and that kind of thing kind of took on a life of its own. It's just like Mick Foley can pretend that a lot of the early stuff he did and you know, like having a submission tape where he's jumping off the roof of a building onto a mattress, he can pretend that stuff didn't open up a Pandora's box and lead to all kinds of horrible shit, but it did. What am I saying about Joey Ryan ultimately? You can say that he's making a lot of money and he's getting his brand out there and all that stuff, and that's true. You can say that a lot of the stuff he's doing is at best in sort of poor taste and at worst is wrecking what credibility pro wrestling has left. And I think that's true too. But here's my thing about the whole Joey Ryan thing. This is the one litmus test that I would put to it, and it's this. Does working with Joey Ryan help your career? Does having Joey Ryan on your show elevate your show in any way, shape, or form? No. I don't think... I think when Foley did a thing with Joey Ryan, what it served to do was diminish Foley. I think when people wrestle a match against Joey Ryan, in their minds they might think like, oh, I'm working with a bigger star and that's helping me, but ultimately does nothing. You just sort of get caught in his wake. Now that's not a knock on Joey Ryan per se, except to say, ultimately, if a big star is on your show, it's not just a matter of who wins, who loses. Does their presence elevate your show? And I think in Joey Ryan's case, it does not. I don't think it elevates your show from a quality standpoint, from a teach your guys something standpoint. It's just he's the very definition of an attraction. He's the two-headed baby in formaldehyde jar at a carnival. Does that elevate the carnival? No. Will people sometimes pay to go see the two-headed baby in a formaldehyde jar? Yes. Does that mean that it's great? No. That's my take on Joey Ryan. He's the two-headed baby in the formaldehyde jar that is making money with it right now. Probably because he can't catch on anywhere else, and that's not a knock on him. I admire that hustle, and he's got his angle. I'm just sort of sad that he hasn't found a way to elevate somebody other than himself with it. Yeah. because most of the other innovative stuff, ECW, did it elevate all of those guys with all the crazy stuff they did? I don't know. Did all of them get jobs with major promotions later on for getting paid way more than they probably deserved? Yes. So I think you could say that those things were a success. And as much as someone like Jim Cornette, I think it was Kendall Wallace had the take of like, he's getting to the point where listening to Jim Cornette is kind of like, oh God. And I kind of agree with Kendall Wallace. I've agreed with that for a long time, honestly. But that doesn't mean he's wrong about Joey Ryan. Now, do I think that it's the end all be all? No, but I don't think Joey Ryan. I think he's a guy who takes way more than he gives, and if your take on that is that's fine, then take it for what it is. But that's my take, that he takes way more from wrestling than he ever contributes. And anybody who's trying to say that he's some sort of Lenny Bruce-esque groundbreaker in some way are really kind of just arguing for the sake of arguing. Cool. The Atlanta TV segment with Jacob Ashworth and Will Kaution, I thought it was great. And, in this, everybody keeps saying wrestling is in this boom period, wrestling is in this boom period, wrestling is in this boom period. Yet, why are there not more stories like this? Anytime that wrestling has gotten a sort of a foothold and been popular, you see a million news stories and newspaper stories and all that kind of stuff about indie wrestling. But this one was sort of notable in the fact that it's the only one, right? Now some promotions have done a great job. I will say, Southern Fried got themselves on the radio, and then they got some like local stuff, and that's great. And Southern Honors, a similar thing, that's great too. But I find that curious because at a time where news shows and newspapers and magazines and all this stuff, they need content like crazy. And pro wrestling in its own way is bigger than ever, or bigger than it's been in a long time. I'm getting ahead of myself and sort of overqualifying stuff. Yet there aren't a ton of stories, and I'm not sure what that's about. Just notable. A lot of shows coming up this weekend, right? On Friday, Southern Honor, their first show since the 1000, yeah. 1FW and Pro South in Alabama featuring a Bob Evans seminar. Is the age of the seminar over? Rant number 2. Is this notion that seminars are this incredible thing, has it been overplayed? Yeah. I think it's done. I think this push like 6 months to a couple of years ago of like, if you don't go to seminars, then you don't really care about your career and you need to do these things. I think it's been revealed, and nobody has said it overtly, that all these guys doing all these seminars and stuff, it has completely devalued the concept. To the point where I haven't seen anything about this Bob Evans seminar where there's this discussion of like, oh, you have to go do it, and I did it before and I'm going to do it again because it's so great, and da-da-da. Seminars to me have become the equivalent of booking a name for your show just for the because you want to meet them. That's what this feels like. And that's what most seminars nowadays feel like. It's like we're booking this thing and we're having this seminar, but it's really just so we can say the prestige of we're having this seminar, so our thing feels more like an event instead of just a wrestling show with this thing tacked on. My take. On the 8th on Saturday, you got New Era doing their thing, right? You got TWE in Tennessee, Anarchy Wrestling, of course, and Georgia Premier on the 8th as well. So it's a big, huge weekend. I'm sure Rod is going to get out to some of these shows, Larry perhaps as well. I also noticed Stranglehold is doing a show on July 6th. And I couldn't help but think of New Generation's 250 people in a 3,500 arena, because Stranglehold's doing a lot of promotion. I'll give this to them. They've gotten out early, and they've got a bunch of videos. It looks all very like shitty to me. Not all of it. Obviously, the thing with Animal and that tag team, like that looked pretty good. But the rest of it really looks like a bunch of people pretending to be a wrestler. That might anger people, you know. It is what it is. Eric Nelson doesn't particularly like me, full disclosure. But yeah, I look at the stranglehold stuff and I go, and people are kind of pretending to be excited about it. I guess because you have to be, especially if you're on that show. But I look at that thing and I just go, that's one of those shows I'm not going to hear a report from. I know it. And it's going to be one of those shows where they're going to lie about their crowd, etc., etc. Debuting this week is another segment I'm going to do. You can tell I'm feeling it, man. I'm going to do this story thing. I'm going to have another review, Be Kind review out this week, and I'm going to debut, a lot of people have asked this and a lot of people have suggested this, so I'm just going to sort of formalize it that way. I'm encouraged to do it more often, which is I'm going to call it the plist, the P list, and I'm just going to have a list every week. Sometimes I might do the, like, who are the top 10 wrestlers in Georgia, for example. But I wanted to start off strong. So I'm starting off with 10 things I hate about Georgia wrestling. Why beat around the... Yeah. So look for that. And now, the commentary portion of our show. Southern Fried. Southern Fried Championship Wrestling in Shindig 6. Yeah. I'll say this. Larry's take on the show, as far as his analysis of the show, it's one of the best things that Larry has written. One of the best show reviews I've seen from him in quite some time. I think where he was very honest. Larry is always very gracious, and that's the thing that he doesn't get credit for. And he was similarly gracious with this one, but he really did give you a sense of the flavor of, and he touched on things, right? He was honest. He's like, a lot of people left near the end. The show was too long. Larry listed the crowd that Southern Fried wanted listed, right? Which is the easiest way to do a take. And I saw a thing where, okay, so people that were there, I heard numbers that ranged from like 600 tops to maybe they had 700. It doesn't seem like it's a building that could fit that many people into it. And Southern Fried is saying 842 tickets sold, but over 1,000 people attending. Does that mean they gave out 160 plus comps? I fucking doubt it. Here's my commentary. Southern Fried did great. I think Larry's right. No matter how it shakes out, what the reality of that crowd size is, it's the biggest crowd they've ever had, most likely. Though if they really did get 651 in that building. And I don't think the one fan video I saw where they panned around, I'm like, look at this sea of people. It didn't look like 700, 800, or especially 1,000 people. It just didn't. It didn't look like you could put that many people in the building, and the bleachers were not full. Like, okay. I feel like I need to squash this thing about crowds. Is it important to list your crowds? Of course, I've always said that. It is important. It is a crowd the measure of a scoreboard? Absolutely. It is an indication of success. Did I say a bunch of stuff about how, like, Shindig needed to get at least 500 to be considered a success in light of that's what they drew last year? Absolutely, and I still believe that. And they apparently did that, so that's great. But beyond giving your own diehards a talking point, I saw Doc Brock, slipped in the like, yeah, and in spite of the fact it was 900 people, which now David Manders is saying 1,000 plus. Does it diminish them for obviously lying about their crowd in some way, shape, or form? Yeah, I think there's, people will allow for 10%. Let's say, or rounding up in a reasonable fashion. I saw the Young Bucks sort of put out a joke about how you round up thousands like the WWE does, right? and there's a wrestling tradition of exaggerating your crowds, right? 93,173. People that know wrestling know what that is. That's the WrestleMania 3 attendance number, even though it wasn't true, right? And that might hurt some people to hear that. Hear it and understand it. 93,173 did not happen, except for the fact that it did. Because they said it, people believed it, it became canon. Yep. And apparently that's what Shindig's trying to do. They're either playing this game of, we're going to say we got 1,000. So that way it seems like we're in the we're in the same league with Southern Honor, because we really want to hold on to this thing of we're the best promotion and we did this great job, right? But lying about your crowd, I think it takes away from the incredible accomplishments of that show. I think it's sad. And I think it's weird that a lot of guys running promotions who are in their shoot jobs, God, I hate that term, right? In their real jobs, have these positions of authority and where they need to engender trust, are so comfortable with lying and so uncomfortable with admitting fault. And that goes for just about every promoter out there right now. They are loath to admit fault. And I get that you have to present strength, and, you know, we're in a Trump era where it's just about doubling down on the bullshit, and, you know, it's just about getting my people involved, and as long as my people are behind me and believe in what I'm saying, then it's all right. You know, there comes a point where people go like, how come pro wrestling doesn't have legitimacy? How come, like, the general public that doesn't know anything about wrestling still says, like, yeah, but it's fake. Of course it's fake. It's, you know, we've always said that it's predetermined, and I don't know why people still... I'll tell you why. Because the reputation of pro wrestling is shit. Because the people who run it, the promoters, at heart, it's one thing to embrace a carny mentality, and I certainly get it. And I love carnivals, and I love all of that stuff, and I love the whole notion of wrestling. I love that wrestling is outlaw and still on the fringe. But there's just a general, just full of shit thing about pro wrestling that's just a little bit worse than other things. And pro wrestling people would say, no, everything's full of shit, and the NFL's rigged, and the NBA's rigged, and da-da-da-da-da. But when it boils down to it, there's just a complete lack of moral structure in pro wrestling that I think a lot of the promoters in Georgia continue to perpetuate. Is it all of them? Not necessarily. But it's most of them. And Southern Fried, amongst their people in their inner circle, which at the end of the day, most people would say, well, that's all you should care about. They're proud, and rightfully so, that they pulled off a big show. You know? It was a very indulgent show. That's the impression I got looking at Larry's thing. And the fact that they couldn't avoid lying about a crowd that was already incredibly huge, but they felt the need to, 842 paid in that building. I mean, it's not realistic, right? And saying that you had over 1,000, so you comped 160 plus people on top of having 842, none of it passes the smell test. And I think all it does is diminish the fact that at your biggest show of the year, you pulled off probably the biggest crowd you've ever had. You honored Charles very well. And you pulled off the big moments in your show, right? The thing with Todd winning was very effective. The dog collar match worked really great. I love that idea that Drew Blood left in the way that he did. I think that's fantastic. And obviously, though it felt really, really forced when I looked at that clip of, like, let's literally have the baby faces, like, pound the mat, kind of block the crowd. I think that's a bad stage picture, but that's just me as a kind of a theater guy. Pound, 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 pound. Yay, Jacob Ashworth won. Confederate flag shit on him. That's another story. Yeah, great moments. Why you have to lie? Why do you have to embellish? It's okay for things to be the truth. Yeah, 93,173, WrestleMania 3, and it's part of the lore. I get that. But for the people that are even a little bit on the outside looking in, it takes what should have been a triumph and diminishes it and makes it kind of a joke. Now, with Southern Honor, 1,042. Is that 93,173 for them? I don't know. I'll be honest. Maybe that's a lie too. And if it is what it is. But I'm sure looking forward to when these big shows happen. Here's the next test for me, and then I'm going to end this. The next big thing that's happening is Scenic City. And are they going to lie about their crowd? Because the pressure is now on them, right? Southern Honor passed their test. Southern Fried passed their test. Though I think there was a question about Southern Honor's crowd. And there's definitely a question about Southern Fried's crowd. Is Scenic City going to feel the need to keep pace? On the surface, they're going to say no. But the reality is if the trend continues, where it's like their first year of gangbusters, second year fantastic, third year, the first night was pretty much a disaster, second night recovered. If this year, and all the shows leading up to this thing have been sort of questionable as far as like the crowd size, where you're like, man, people are not really giving as much of a shit about this stuff. And I see that they're putting out a thing saying like, oh, we still have fourth row left, but ticket sales are going really good. I get that you have to pump it up. But if Scenic City just isn't as big of a deal this year, when it's clearly out of the hands of Ace, yeah, who's become like this sort of outwardly angry, bitter dude, which I kind of love. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's his take on Southern Fried was fucking brutal. Bam, bam, bam. Right? Most of it's shit and da 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 da. What's Scenic City gonna do? I hope that they can start the trend of transparency. Though I suspect perhaps they're in too deep to do so. It'll be interesting to see. Thanks for tuning in. No tipping point tonight, but we'll be back next week.